Two first mates, two masks, two individuals hidden away. Where Katakuri would don his scarf to compensate for a lack of faith in his institution, King would veil his identity to declare complete fealty to his. The origin of these lifelong obscurities both have roots in adolescence. Katakuri was hoisted up in an environment marching toward false inclusion. Since Big Mom yearned to add more races to her fantastical collection, she inadvertently lost sight of the people already in her possession. She couldn't see how she discriminates them and how they discriminate each other. Her territory paradoxically becomes ripe with the same global problem she wants to avoid, just like the island that she later goes on to lay claim to. Because of this, the people that act as her vanguard, her children, must endure her oversight, her lack of competency as a captain. And the man who single-handedly reinforces this blood-linked brigade is the person most affected by Big Mom's greatest shortcoming. Katakuri faced discrimination, but when his constitution proved to be unyielding, society enlightened him on the most marginalized people of all, the weak. If he is to protect what matters most to him, he'd have to sweep away all imperfections, not only hiding away the very thing that gives him individuality, but discovering an energy similar to Big Mom's in an effort to replace what should be her burden. His Conqueror's Haki demonstrates his role as the family's shadow leader, the beacon they all count on when they can't rely on their childlike mother. Katakuri is the person who suffers, accounts for, and helps correct Big Mom's oversights toward her goal, a man who creates a second captain seat by destroying his outward persona. And simultaneously paralleling and conveying a dichotomy between him, King wears his mask to not overtake his leader's presence. If he were to expose his true form, people would see the silhouette of the former gods, those who once lived at the top of the world just like the current rulers. But King does not yearn to reclaim that position for himself. He sees only to give Kaido all advantages to be the sole creature at the summit. But for what purpose? If Kaido's actions represent a world he will create, what exactly is his vision beyond the One Piece? Despair? Subjugation? A kind of fate the current regime dealt to Albert. All he wanted was to break free, and Kaido granted him liberation. But, ironically, in submitting to Kaido's plan out of gratitude, he would be used to chain and torture many more souls, effectively aiding a similar system that once bound him in the same vein. But, similar to the mask he puts over his head, he decides to smother his qualms. After all, Kaido validates the very lesson Katakuri learned as a child. Might cures all ailments. It breaks any chain. Kaido could free himself and subsequently Albert because he had the strength to do so. The citizens of Wano are weak, therefore they suffer. If the beast nesting in Onigashima never came, their lack of strength would eventually be their downfall at the hands of another dominator anyway. What's the difference? But there is. The ones at the top, at the pinnacle where King's mighty race used to reside, are the weakest of all. It's only that this upside-down world allows them to be defended by more competent powerhouses. Kaido would spin the globe back on its feet and drag it down into chaos, thus ending the world the way it should have lived, with the truly strong dictating the tides. And most ironic of all, this man with the epithet of king willingly lowers his godly status to not shine brighter than his captain. Not only does he live a life opposite to Kaido's philosophy, but he aids him in doing the same terrible thing that placed him under the King of Beasts' command in the first place. Where King would fall due to these contradictions, Katakuri would rise up with an answer opposed to his mother. The scarf he wears, symbolizing a faulty leadership based on a facade, is discarded. No longer will he storm his individual path based on someone else's will, but protect his siblings with his own, his conqueror's spirit. Mirroring the focal protagonist of this arc, the secret main antagonist wields it here as a reward for staying true to himself. And, just like Luffy when he saw through Sanji's lies, and even far enough to know where his cook would end up through that storm, Katakuri gazes beyond Big Mom's territory, his sights locked on a man exuding a level of clumsy competency that surpasses his own cool calculations. Katakuri did not aid Big Mom's contradictory discrimination. He actively defended his siblings from it, and now even feels responsible for allowing an enemy to be subject to it. He propagated it when he underestimated the potential right before him. But now that the scarf skewing his vision is out of the way, he can see his enemy clearly for the first time. His observation keener than ever before. He didn't abide by Big Mom's toxic code of conduct then, and doesn't submit to her status quo of the perfect stoic son now. a man who has finally found himself by coming to blows with a different kind of conqueror. When Katakuri falls, it isn't out of lack of strength, but admiration of the indomitable will before him. He might be a man who can see a bit into the future, but Luffy reveals just how far beyond that he's been peering for so long. He's content with losing to a man with more observant eyes than his, especially since, through Luffy, they are finally fully open. He may fall on his back now, but this too is a statement more than it is a defeat. He is no longer the farce he concocted veiled by a scarf, but an imperfect man with a will of his own. From this failure, he will rise again and grow as an individual. But King, he plummets as a knight in full servitude of someone else. Before this grand fall, his vanquisher gave him a hint. Even with the captain above him, he awakens as a conqueror. Not to overshadow Luffy, but to be an essential power to rise him higher than any other pirate. While Zoro vocalizes both his own individual path and his duty as a Straw Hat, Albert raises his sword to merely one notion, making Kaido Pirate King. Nothing for himself. Nothing to embolden his constitution toward a stronger form. Even his final attack is a mirror of Kaido's, a smaller dragon of flame that could never hoist the weight of its superior, never ascend that bigger dragon into the great beyond. He mocks Zoro for lacking the biological assets that give him a disadvantage. Yet, unknown to King, this ambitious swordsman carries the weight of a long history through his own heritage. Zoro might not know it himself, but his Bushido way perfectly harmonizes with their timeless desires, both Ryuma and Ushimaru alike. Same as Odin, they fought to defend Wano's beauty, a country once brimming with food and freedoms aplenty. Scenery Zoro fights to help restore in the current age. But on the opposing side, Albert aids the man who blanketed all that radiance. Despite knowing the history of his race's persecution and subsequent subjugation, he complies with Kaido's dogma. It was a superior force that plucked Lunarians off their domain and damned King from birth. Yet this same ideology resonates with Kaido's way of piracy, and Albert complies with it as if it's any different. After all, regarding the future, he expects nothing from him anymore. Kaido gave up on seeing a brighter world, and so too did his most loyal knight. Both convictions a compromise for what they truly desire deep within, and both fall by the wills of men who shine bright enough to illuminate their end goals clearly. Through fighting Luffy, Katakuri saw the first rays of an alternate future. Through fighting Zoro, King sinks into the inevitable quicksand that comes from entrusting his entire future to a suicidal beast. One new path ever so slightly illuminated after embracing individuality, while the other, just like his fallen wing, severing completely after discarding everything for someone else's dream, even his own name. Katakuri smiles on his back as he recalls his victorious enemy, while King grits through his powerlessness against a new enemy after plummeting to the ground below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed what I had to say. Don't forget to click that bell if you're new here too. Support me on Patreon for exclusive benefits. Link in the description down below. Thank you so much to my top supporters: Sensei Krolon, Dre, and Yo-Yo Man. Well, that's all folks. Spice Boy, out.